to celebrate International Women's Day here in Fingal and the incredible contribution women are making to the development of our region, Fingal County Council Community Development Office is recognising and supporting women's leadership through conversations about the challenges and opportunities women experience in setting out to improve our communities. I'm Lucy Michael, and I'm joined here today by Catherine Joyce of Blanchardstown Traveller Development Group. Catherine, thank you so much for being here with me today. Can we start by talking about your current role in leadership?
Okay, I'm one of the joint managers of Blanchardstown Traveller Development Group. We're a local community development organisation and we work in the Dublin 15 area. We do a number of things. We provide services directly to travellers, so supports and advocacy and training programs, employment opportunities, primary healthcare programs. But we also work with the local community about trying to ensure that they're aware of traveller issues, but that they're also aware of the human rights concerns that we have around some of the stuff around travellers. And we do a number of community initiatives to try and cross the barrier between travellers and settled people. Our approach, I suppose, is two-pronged and it is multi-layered in terms of the services and the types of stuff that we offer to our community.
And Catherine, I mean, you're a well-known advocate in our area for quite a while now. Can we talk a little bit about what you feel is important in community leadership?
I think there's a couple of things important in community leadership. I think you have to have a commitment to the area or issue that you're involved in. So regardless of where you come from in society or where you're in society, I think you have to have a commitment to the issue that you're looking at or dealing with. So for some people, it's traveller human rights. For other people, it's about access or it's about disabilities. It's about homelessness. It's about drug misuse. And very often from our experience that it's women who are mostly engaging with services like that because they're the voice of our communities. And even prior to the dismantling of the community development sector in Blanchardstown, we had a lot of women who were involved in those projects in Mulhudderton, Hartstown and Huntstown and Corduff and places like that. I think there was only one man that used to come to our coordinators meeting, but mostly all women were engaging at that. So I think you have to have at heart a concern that is real and that you know about. But I think it also helps if you have a commitment and experience and skills to do that as well. Because sometimes it can be a very simple thing from writing a letter or making a phone call to actually lobbying and campaigning local government around some of the issues that affect the community. So having the skills and the experiences is also very useful. And I think that's something that we have been very good at in the community development sector, about passing those skills on, developing the capacity of people to represent their own views, but also I think to be able to advocate on behalf of people who feel that they can't advocate for themselves. So for instance, the new communities in Blanchardstown are under a lot of pressure at the moment because of the backlash of racist attacks and violence and protests against the new communities, particularly the black communities. So I think it's our imperative to support communities that are under attack like that, and particularly when you look at the impact internally in the community. So what is it having on young people who have to go to schools with some of the settled young people who are protesting against them? What impact is it having on mothers who are using community centres and health centres and employment in our area, or basic services like language courses with other communities that are actually out protesting against them? And we as traveller organisations have first-hand experience of that, because on one hand we're lobbying local organisations to support us around traveller issues, and at the same time they're the people who are objecting to traveller sites in their area. So I think it's important to share those skills and experience and to support others who need that help and to be an advocate for those people. I think that our own experience in Blanchardstown has taught us that it's okay for people to talk on behalf of a community, but it's better to have people from that community to talk for themselves. So I think that you have to know when to pull away and when to advocate with and on behalf of people.
And that's a very difficult thing doing community leadership when you're not only trying to get over structural barriers about access to healthcare or education, or as you say, safe places to live, but also to deal with that stigma and shame that others put on a community. And of course, you've been doing wonderful work in that regard. What would you like to see change?
I think the thing that I would like to see is a little bit more equality in our area. First of all in Blanchardstown, but also in Fingal, because we have pockets and areas in Fingal that are actually very deprived themselves. So it's very hard to ask people who have very little themselves in terms of resources or services to give up something to another community, or to give up something to another group of people that are in need. So I think I'd like to see a little bit more parity with access to resources, community services, drug services, access to homeless services. But I think more importantly, what we do need to do is we need to start looking at how we can be unified around some of the issues. So the travel community has issues that are separate to ours. So like access to education and accommodation that's culturally appropriate. But we also have issues that are of concern to every community in Blanchardstown. So like access to good quality healthcare, access to community services, social services, civic services. Blanchardstown has actually got great resources up in the centre, but you'll tend that the working class people go to shop and to go home. They don't use the library, they don't use the theatre, they might use the council offices when there's an issue, but they use them any other day. So I think it's about looking at how we share the community and social resources that we have in a community, and how they're more accessible to communities that feel that they're not there for them. So it's not just travellers and it's not just economic immigrants, it's local settled people that live in Blanchardstown that don't have that access. So I think that would be one of the things that I would like to see. Obviously, I would like to see the focus changing from what's in need and what do we want and what do we have to have, to a situation where we can look at developing some of the creative stuff around Blanchardstown, because we tend to bring a lot of people into Drioch, but it's very hard to see places like Corduff represented in theatre in there. So they're always subjects of the arts rather than the makers of the arts. So I think a little bit more of that would be very useful for areas that are under pressure or are marginalised or have a mix of community entities within them. So to allow them to express that in a positive way. Local capacity building would be something that I think is important. And I think engagement with the community, particularly where there's crisis events happening. So like the riots that happened quite recently, I think more resources should be put in there, not just for the policing of it, because I think that's important as well. We have to abide by law and order issues. But I think about building up the community and building cross-community connections.
And that's so important too, isn't it? To building our communities as places that we all want to be together. And you're right, that conversation about what we need sometimes just doesn't take us into those relationships that are long-standing, where you and I can talk to each other about what our communities are and what we want them to be. What about the roles that women are playing in the community at the moment, and how important is that?
Yeah, I think if we take the travel community, and I take the travel community because it's my first-hand experience, but I think it's no different than any community. Women tend to be the forefront of the negotiators at a family level. So you're advocating on behalf of your children, you're advocating with the schools, you're advocating with the local GAA club, you're advocating with the swimming pool, wherever it is, whatever resources your children use, you're the person or the forefront of it. Not in all cases, because some families have single parent families and some parents have children have two dads and some parents have two moms, but in most cases it's predominantly the women that are engaging with community or engaging with services that our children use. So I think from that point of view, it was only a natural progression that women would become advocates on behalf of not just our children, but on behalf of our family and on behalf of our community. I think it's important that the capacity of women is built up to do that, or that we're not just there sitting at the table listening to what's getting said about our community, but we're there able to challenge what's actually getting said and done, or what resources are going into our communities. Progressed in the community development training programs, they progressed in the advocacy programs and the primary healthcare programs. We have more women CE participants than we do have men engaging with CE. So those things are kind of natural arenas for community development and for capacity building.
And there are some amazing role models from the traveller community in terms of women's leadership over generations.
Yeah, recently we've had a senator elected. Eileen Flynn has been elected to the Senate on not just on travel issues, but she's actually been an advocate for other issues: water charges, bin charges, inequality for women, access to education across the community. She's actually a very good advocate on behalf of new communities as well. We've Dr. Cindy Joyce in Limerick that has got a doctorate from the university down there and is a very good human rights advocate on behalf of the Traver community. And we have some other women that I can think of around the country that have made inroads into third level education, into the political system, and who represent Travers at the highest level in Three, like they're sitting on the Department of Education advisory committees on education, health, accommodation, and we have Traver women who are starting to look at inroads into the arts and about expressing our gender issues internally within the Traver community as well. So yeah, we've a thriving community within a community where these women have progressed to the highest level, not just in the Traver community, but in terms of the political arena in Ireland as well. So it's encouraging to see that. But it has taken a couple of generations to get us there. Our job now is to keep those women and keep those spaces open for women from Traver and ethnic minority groups open, so that they don't have to in another generation time fight for to be at that table as well. I'm 35 years talking about Traver human rights. The issues have changed over those 35 years. Like we were calling for ethnicity, we were acknowledged in the Dáil in 2017 as an ethnic minority group. So that's no longer the main focus. We have got that acknowledgement. Now we have to see or reap the rewards of that acknowledgement from government at a national level and at a local level. And I think that it's important that we mind our communities and that we look after the people in our communities. And I think in order to do that, we do have to look at the basics of having access to water and toilets, electricity, food on the table, and having internet access for children to engage with their friends and with their schools is important.
Such important points, Catherine, because those are real challenges for leadership. When you are doing community leadership around particular issues, it's very hard to make progress on them when people literally have hungry bellies, when children can't connect to their schools. And the pandemic has really shown up those inequalities and thrown up so many more. Can you tell me, what do you see as the biggest challenge for young women coming into community leadership now, and what advice would you give them?
If we leave all of the basic resources issue out of it, I think that we still find in Blanchardstown that we have really strong women. We have some people now in the Institute of Technology in Blanchardstown that we're closely supporting and resourcing to stay on in school. And they're quite young women, people who hadn't engaged before, people who hadn't been involved. I think the basic need is that you have to be able to develop programs and tailor programs to meet the needs of the community that you're dealing with. In our case, it's the Traver community. Sometimes we have added issues because we have literacy problems, or we have issues about accommodation, or issues to electricity or computers or whatever it is. But I think the fundamental issue is the same. It's about getting access to courses and training that will allow you to develop your own personal skills so that you can advocate on behalf of your own needs and your family needs. In some cases, it's about making sure that you push some of these people into those training and course opportunities, because they don't naturally see themselves as advocates, and they don't naturally see themselves as a representative voice for the community. And they think, okay, I can talk about my own situation, but I'm not going out there talking about all of the other situations that are out there. But when they start talking, they realise themselves how inclusive they are of other people who are experiencing similar issues with them. So it's about opening up doors, but also opening up the eyes of the individuals so that they can see how much of an input and impact that they can have by doing simple things. So somebody going as an individual to a college course and doing a community development course might be seen as a very personal thing. But if you're the only person in your community that has done that in the last 10 years, then you become a role model to other people who didn't think that was a possibility. If you become a role model to people who have left school early and didn't think, well, because of my literacy, I can't do that. So indirectly, you are having an influence on what's going on in the community and in the mindset of the people of the community. So I think it's important that we nurture those people who put their head up and say, actually, I have something to say here. Whether it's in relation to drugs or health or women or access to services or whatever the issue is, but that we support that. Very often those campaigns can be very short-lived campaign. So you can have communities campaigning for a playground in the area, and once it's built, that's the campaign gone. But you can have other women who are campaigning for the rights of children with disabilities or young adults with mental health issues, and those become a long-term campaign. So you not just have to have skills around how to participate, but you have to have endurance skills as well. So very often we find ourselves looking at how do we support these individuals who are these voices, as opposed to supporting the campaign about what the voice is saying.
Well, Catherine, you have given us so much today to think about in terms of what we can learn from your community and your advocacy. Really great role models, but also having a mind to those real inequalities that are here in our area that we live with day in, day out, and are often blind to. You've talked a little bit about coalition building, need for us to work together and to imagine and build our communities together. And that's very important to think about. And then finally, you've talked about the difficulties that women have with defining themselves as as leaders. Um, Sometimes it's easier as a woman to define yourself as doing leadership rather than being a leader. And that's certainly something that's come up in our interviews this week. So thank you for being with us today. Our final question then is, why do you think International Women's Day is important?
I think International Women's Day is important so that we send a message out to say that we're united in this connection, this day that we share. But I think it has to be a little bit more than a symbolic gesture. I think it has to be about us looking at how we proof how we do things. So what impact are we going to have if we say something, if we send a message out? As women, what impact are we going to have on other women, on young girls, on young children in our community? So I think International Women's Day gives us an opportunity to reflect on how and why we do stuff. So I think it connects us, but it can also be a signal to divide us if we allow it to. So I think it's important that we challenge ourselves, if not on any other day of the year, but on International Women's Day, and ask ourselves just 3 questions. What are we doing for our own better good, mentally and physically? What are we doing for the better good of our community that we live in or share, and wherever that is? And then what are we doing to give back to the other people in our community and people who need in need, particularly women, on International Women's Day? And if we can answer them 3 questions honestly to ourselves, then we can be the advocate and we can be the voice, we can be the representative that our communities need and that women need in society.
Well, the theme of International Women's Day 2021 is Choose to Challenge, and you've given us quite a few ways to challenge both others and ourselves, and thank you for that. Catherine Joyce, happy International Women's Day.
And to you, happy International Women's Day, everybody.